At the end of the last video, we met Alsanna, the Silent Oracle, who was married to the Ivory King of Eleum Loyce. Now I find Alsanna to be one of the more peculiar characters in this game, in that her origin is something that I find to be dark, malevolent, and evil, but her character is actually somewhat good-natured, even though her core aspect is that she is fearful. And this aspect of her character is explored in her future dialogue, as well as things like her soul description, which reads, "Soul of Alsanna, Oracle of Eleum Loyce, who prays in silent vigilance. This child of dark, in reverence of the apocalypse, devotes herself to a ritual in hopes of appeasing the raging flame." So a slight spoiler here, Alsanna is actually a fragment of Manus, the father of the Abyss. So she was born of the Abyss. She is essentially the Abyss given physical form. But unlike the other embodiments of the Abyss we've run into, like the Wrathful Queen or the Ashen Bride, Alsanna isn't inherently evil. She's actually just someone who is fearful. It's interesting how each of the queens represents an aspect of Manus's original personality, I suppose. It's up to interpretation, but what I think is most interesting about her is that she represents his fear. The item description for the sword Eleum Loyce reads, "The enigmatic Alsanna quietly found a place at the Ivory King's side, and when his strength was fully drained, he conferred this sword, inscribed with the name of the land, to her." So Alsanna sought strength with the Ivory King. She was fearful of losing her existence, and she found that strength to live on and to find someone to confide in the Ivory King. And what's interesting is the Ivory King knew what she was, and yet he accepted her anyways. And I find that to be a really amazing part of the story, and it's actually makes it a little heartbreaking once you find out the full tale. In that, essentially, the Ivory King's mission was to stop the spread of the old chaos that loomed below Eleum Loyce, and since he ventured below with his faithful knights to put an end to the chaos, Alsanna has remained up above to watch over the kingdom and stop the spread of the old chaos lest it run amok. So the fact that she's remained so faithful to her duty and to her king and her husband just really speaks to the strength and nobility of her character. It makes a stark contrast to the other fragments of the Abyss we've met in Dark Souls 2. We'll hear more from Alsanna herself later on, but I wanted to explore more of her lore because I do think she is a really neat character. The Retainers are a unique enemy in this area because they don't directly attack you, at least not right away. When the spell is still cast on Eleum Loyce and it's completely covered in snow and ice, these Retainers will not attack you. They're completely docile. But as soon as you get the Eye of the Priestess, they will suddenly attack you. And that catches you quite off guard because you aren't quite ready for them when it does happen the first time, and I remember it caught me very much by surprise when I first encountered them. But the Retainer robe reads, "Robe of the Retainers in the Cathedral City. Long ago, the Retainers attended to the priestesses, but with them gone, the Retainers were left to wander frigid Eleum Loyce, without purpose." So this lore description here seems to imply that since the priestesses have vanished from Eleum Loyce, the Retainers have been left without their purpose, and as such have been driven mad or have gone hollow or any of the above. They are no longer the people they once were, and they're only a shell of their former existence. But what I find neat about this is that it shows that the there was some kind of religious hierarchy in Eleum Loyce, in that the priestesses had a really high form of status, and that the retainers were also a key part of what went on in Eleum Loyce, and probably made it the great, prosperous kingdom it once was. As far as I know, there's no real lore description for these ice rats, as they're called in the official wiki, but I think they look a little more like icy hedgehogs, just the way they roll around. They kind of look like icy, derpy versions of Sonic, and I think that's what makes me laugh every time I fight them. They do pack quite a punch, though, and that bleed damage does add up if you let it, but they're not too threatening of an enemy. I find them more humorous than anything, but they're not your typical Dark Souls enemy, and I think that's why I like them. They're derpy, cute, slightly threatening, but altogether a fun enemy to fight.
bearer until...
You all remember this guy from the Broom Tower? Well, he's back, and now he's continuing to be a royal pain in the rear. It's really interesting how the developers programmed him to not initially attack you and to act like he's going to help you. He's even dressed as a friendly white phantom, but if you turn your back on him, he's gonna attack you and run away and make you chase after him. And once you do catch up to him, boy, does he have a nasty surprise for you in waiting. What I loved about the NPC invasions of the expansions for Dark Souls 2 is how the developers really tried to make the invaders act like human players. And that includes some of the more scumbag tactics that other players would use. And in this case, this invader is going to lead us to a former boss who has now been downgraded to just a very tough enemy, but I was very surprised to meet him here, as you'll soon see. And that former boss is actually the Covetous Demon. I have no idea why the Covetous Demon is here, to be honest with you. I can't find any lore implications for why this Covetous Demon reskin is here. I just think it was kind of like a fun enemy that the developers threw, and they're like, hey, you remember that boss from earlier? Well, here's a icy version of him, and he's harder than before, so give him a try. And, of course, the Covetous Demon by himself isn't so bad, but you have to contend with the Invader as well, and that just opens up a whole new can of worms, makes it so much more difficult. But it makes for a very interesting and memorable encounter, I have to say, having to contend with the Covetous Demon here. Again, I'm not exactly sure why he's here, but it makes for a very interesting moment nonetheless. And as I stated way early on in my playthrough, the Covetous Demon is actually the Covetous Demon is actually a boss I personally feel is a little underrated. He is a bit of a pushover, but I love his design and his lore. And the fact that we get to fight a variant of him here, while unexpected, definitely unexpected, I have to say, is still pretty darn cool. One of the things I've always loved about the Dark Souls games is just these grand vistas that certain locales in the games have. I just love standing over a cliff or something and looking out on the horizon and wondering, will I be able to journey there? And even if I can't, man, does it look cool. There's tons of great spots like this sprinkled all throughout Dark Souls 2, like in the Huntsman's Copse and the Dragon Eyrie. There's so many cool areas in this game that I just love looking out on, and Eleum Loyce is no exception. It's a beautiful city, especially since I'm a sucker for snow levels in games, anything that has to do with winter or ice or snow. That makes it even doubly pleasing for me, just because I love the blanket of white over the world it creates. It's so cool. So Eleum Loyce is undeniably a beautiful city, even though there's a great evil lurking deep below it. But in order to help us confront this evil, we're seeking out some of the remaining Eleum Loyce knights, who will journey with us down to the Old Chaos. And together with these knights, we will help put the Ivory King to rest.